Hi guys, it's Anaya from the Coalition. Last week I was able to chat with Joel and Luke Smallbone, the members of the band For King and Country. They recently released their newest album, No Turning Back, which looks really good. I haven't seen it yet, but it is out on Prime Video, on the Wonder Project subscription, I believe. But anyways, this interview was me and about a little over a dozen other journalists asking questions. We each got to ask one, and just had such a great conversation, a great time chatting with them. But that does mean that this episode will be a little more awkward, if you will. It'll be a little different. I will record myself asking the question, and then we'll see the response. So thanks for watching, and thanks to all the journalists for their awesome questions, and Joe and Luke Smallbone for sitting down with us. So to start off, can you introduce the project to us? What is No Turning Back? Where did it come from?
You got Unsung Hero, the movie, which I know most of you are familiar with. Interestingly enough, the origins of the documentary beginning kind of started around the same time. It was 2020 when we started developing both. And in some ways, the documentary indicated a lot of the film. If you watch kind of the first act of the documentary, it's Unsung Hero. So what we've been saying is that the documentary is kind of it's the sequel. It's kind of a lot of people say, what happened after? Like, after the film. And this in many ways is a bit of a sequel of sorts to the documentary. And I think the purpose of it was um there's so much, goodness me, particularly in the religious arts, like there's this fallacy that we have to have everything together all the time, and this family of these seven ragamuffins and parents and these immigrants, gee whiz, aren't they awesome? And it was kind of an opportunity to go, guys, let's peek. Our brother Ben, who directed it, did a marvelous job in let's peek behind the curtain and go, here's some of the struggle and the visceral bits and the illness and the ego and the issues that we all faced as a family, and then the grace of God literally sort of weaving the narrative together to date. And so the award does go to Brother Ben because he directed it, like I said, really championed piecing it together, and then also um, caught a lot of that footage from 25 years ago with Rebecca. He was already filming a lot of that, so that was from his POV, a lot of it. So excited to break it down with you. But yeah, that's kind of a synopsis of No Turning Back, the documentary.
What do you believe young people have their eyes fixed on instead of God?
I think young people have. I think that young people are asking the question of, "Is God real?" I think that's the question that everyone actually, especially early on, is coming back to. Like, I've been taught some of these things. I've been taught maybe what it was, to read scripture or to attempt to pray, and we go to church, and at the end of the day, they go through some of these things, and they get to a certain age, and they go, "Okay, hold up, is God actually real?" And when I think that no turning back, where I think it comes in is the best way to prove and to show evidence for anything is to actually look backwards. And I think the hope is for this story is for it's a little bit of a peek backwards to what it was like for us growing up. It's a peek backwards into the faithfulness of who God is. It's a peek backwards into seeing the evidence of who He is through our story. It's not lost on me that Jesus told stories while He was doing His ministry, and they were stories that often they actually weren't even real stories, but the stories were actually that powerful that they changed people's lives. They changed people's eternal destinations. And so when I even look at what we do, that's why I think it's important to tell stories, is because it shows evidence of who God is, and you get the gift of seeing the trail of God's faithfulness in your life. And so when it comes to young people, I think they're asking, hey, is God real? The hope is they can watch something like this and maybe it answers some of the questions of, oh, well, I see it in something like No Turning Back, this
Mm.
documentary.
And when you look at the footage from when you were a kid, what is your biggest takeaway?
I wish I had a skipped my boy band era. I There's so many layers to that onion, as you know, because it's covering so many portions. Um, I think I leave we left the premiere specifically on Monday, and we did say, because we've been keeping an eye on it for a few years now, going, that might be the last time we watch it, because it's important to look back. It's therapeutic to look back, but I think there are pieces of it for both of us that, and Rebecca as well, that's really it's hard to look back. And so it's all of it. I've had to fight at points the would have, could have, should have of the past, which, as we know, is not the best way to be human. Um, but I really get to the end and I go, there is great, great, great gratitude. And what I love is, as opposed to the movie that was so positioned around mom and dad and Rebecca and our family, what I love about this, Dwayne, is it shows that if it weren't for this ensemble of incredible ragamuffins for 3 decades, there's no chance we would be on this Zoom today. Like there's so many other layers to, and that's just scratching the surface still of all of the people that were involved. And so I'm just enormously grateful. And there's a closing monologue that I retracked probably 15 times. And it was just going over like, I want you to know this is not a story about just Luke and me. This is a story about my parents, about my sister, but it's about all of us coming together more than ever. We are so fixed on our own story that we forget that there's this great narrative that we just get to be part of the ensemble. Like we're not the superstars of the show. And I hope the documentary does that. I hope people go, yeah, we can push forward. Yeah, we can press on. But man, it's about the ensemble. It's not about the two people that are in front of the camera in this case, you know.
Was there a single moment in your seasons of rejection where you kind of questioned God's calling, and what brought you back ultimately to realizing that this is really where he wanted you?
Look, I think that, dreams are extremely fragile. New beginnings, new businesses, new life. It's all very fragile. And I think, obviously the documentary kind of talks about a little bit of my journey, which was God had given me gifts growing up, and I used to be able to just sing because I sang, but I never really thought of it being something that I would do for a living. But then when it kind of got into we started working together, I think that there was genuinely this, well, we'll give it a go, sorta thing. And I think Joel actually says it in an interview, and I think it's spot on. And I think I did feel this. Well, if I don't really go all the way in, then if I fail, then my excuse is, well, I never really tried it that hard. I didn't really go for it, and move on to something else. And what I realized is there's no way to actually see a dream or a hope come to fruition unless you give it everything. And what I realized is me giving my everything would also inform, if it did fail, would inform at some level whatever I was then going to go do. And so I came to the conclusion there was no way to actually for any of this thing to make any sense, and if I just went all the way in. But I think sometimes we also sit there and the inclinations that we feel like God's giving us, sometimes there's bobbing and weaving, and there's twists and there's turns. And I don't think you have these hopes, you have these dreams, but you're never quite sure if it actually will take place. I remember specifically coming back from the studio one day when my wife and I were early married, and I went to her and I said, "Hey, am I like I need to see this through, right?" And I think I knew what she would say, but sometimes you need a little bit of, verifying your side of the street. And she just said, "Luke, I think you've got to be able to see this all the way through. And if the door shuts, that's when we close it down. But there's still many doors that are, even if they're cracks, there's still many doors that are open. We got to keep going." And that was enough for me to just, and I can't speak for Joel, but that was enough for me to see it through.
Proverbs 27:21 says, "A man is tested by his praise." So how have you handled and how do you handle both praise and criticism?
I hope we handle praise with a bit of gratitude and acceptance, but also deflection, you know, understanding that it is an ensemble, like we just talked about, Dwayne. And then as far as criticism, Naya, it's our best friend. It has to be safe criticism. You know, you don't want to just have people go out and just rip you a new one and read every comment and take that as critique. No, but constructive, thoughtful, loving criticism, it's our best friend in this. Because if we can't take that, I don't know how we stay creatively grounded, emotionally grounded, spiritually grounded. This is the whole idea of if someone falls in a ditch that you want your brother there to pull you up. This is the whole idea of where two or more are gathered, I'm in their midst. I think it's because we're pulling and pushing on each other. So critique, I it still stings. It'll never stop stinging. It's still painful. You still have to, you know, try and not fire bullets back. But I have found that in life, the moment that people feel afraid to tell you what they really think about you is the moment that you've lost one of the greatest gifts of life. And that is people pouring back into you. And sometimes it's really painful, but that's the beauty. So great question. Great question, Maya. And yeah, I could speak on that for another 30 minutes for sure.
Was there anything while putting together this documentary where you saw God's hand weaving things together that you hadn't seen before?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was interesting looking back on it was, how rough it was to start off. You know, there's nothing like being able to go and look at it, in kind of a story and seeing some of the visuals, and you're like, "Ah, I remember that moment, and that sucked." You know what I mean? And then
You don't know when you're in the depths of despair, when
yeah,
you're in the
and,
depths of
like and
despair
then what's
sometimes.
crazy about this story is, and hopefully you know, hopefully it explains it the right way, but it was like it didn't just suck for moments, it was like, except at times it was years that we were in this kind of thing, and I think that sometimes you struggle to understand the purpose behind it a little bit, and then it's not till you get to maybe some of this point of view a little bit, where you start to see that there is a point to it, that there is a grace over it. I also think, you know, for me personally, you know, reflecting on, you know, that period of time where I was very, very sick, probably have always just, thought to myself like, "Well, I wasn't really that sick." You know?
Mm.
Well, I don't know if I was really you know, I don't know if anyone was really that concerned, and then I look back at those pictures, the reason why there's not more pictures in that period of time is because I was so sick that no one wanted to take any more pictures,
Wow.
and, the last time I recall, actually, weighing myself was at 125 pounds, and there was a great chance that it was, much lower than that. So it's things, but once again, seeing how God works is at the end of the day, guys, that period of sickness was what inspired the next two, three, four albums at some level, and not because of just sickness, because obviously all those songs aren't just about sickness. It's a viewpoint. You know, how many people do you know that you know lived through cancer and they say, "I never want to get cancer again," but it was one of the greatest gifts that God gave me because it changed my perspective.
Mm.
That's what sickness did for me, and I think even when I look back on the miserable times of making music, but that's what that time was. And so there's something about seeing it all put together that you see through lines of, "Oh, there actually was purpose to." I'm gonna use an exaggerated word, but there was purpose behind the misery, if that makes sense.
When you reflect on your life, what's the biggest thing that you see about God now that you didn't earlier?
My journey with Jesus has been just this evolution of understanding and relationship. You know, when you're a teenager, you sort of relate in a certain way, and your 20s you relate in a certain way, and your dynamics with God continue to evolve. And so I'm you know how it is, the more you learn, the less you know. There is some of that. There's some of that mystery that the further I get, the more mysterious and profound God is. Um, so there's a key part of this that is just embracing that mystery. There's another really key part of it of going, God's redemption and love is, I think, because it's always been part of the furniture for us. We grew up in a faith-filled family, generational faith, which is very rare in Australia. You know, great grandparents and great grandparents, you sort of can really easily take this idea of redemption and grace and love for granted. And my goodness, the fact that his mercies are new every morning, the fact that the fact that you read the stories of Jesus and the people that he associated with, the people that he had dinner with, and the people that he called his friends, um, were weren't the creme de la creme. They were the scraps. And I find a lot of grace in that. You know, I find a lot of grace for myself because I mean, you know me well enough to know I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And so this idea of doing it right. Literally, Mariah and I were at the CMAs the other night, and I crossed the road as we were leaving, and there were two officers there, and I said to them, I said, guys, am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? And she laughed and she said, if there was an encapsulation, Joel, of your question of your life, it would be that. But doing the right thing and the shame I feel when I feel like I've done the wrong thing is weighty. But the fact that there's grace and goodness and this extreme love for people like me, I just, man, it sounds rudimentary, but it's been one of the great hallmarks of my journey with Jesus this year. So I'm great to realize that and re-realize it, if you will.
As you see how God has worked in your life, how does that come out in your music?
I often say this: I'm not a good enough songwriter to write songs about things that I don't care about, which is a blessing and a curse. Because if I'm not in it, I can't like get pen to paper or start typing out lyrics. Because uh, I need the songs to feel like they feel like we've lived them, and and that's not for everybody, and not everybody has to make music like that. That's one thing I love about art is everybody's got kind of got a different method and a different thought process of how they do things. But I think for us, and we need to live these lyrics. And so there's a reason why we go so long in between albums is because I need to have lived a little bit of life to actually give me the content for what the songs could be. Because at the end of the day, I'm not very interested in just writing a song that's going to get stuck in people's head. I want to write a song that could impact and influence somebody's eternal destination. But the only way for you to be able to necessarily, be a part of those types of songs, I think, is if you are daily living some of the realities of what you're actually trying to put into songs. And so there's a reason why we write songs about our wives. There's a reason why we write songs about our kids. There's a reason why we write songs about, I often say, you write songs about the highest highs and the lowest lows because no one really remembers in the middle. And for us, I think I've seen these stories and these come out in the fact that um, these songs are lived, that these songs have, my hope is that they have purpose and meaning because they feel like when they listen to the songs, they feel this. I actually think that this person has lived this. That's always been my hope is at the end of the day, we are no but better than anybody out there. We've got the same issues, we've got the same challenges, but our hope is that these songs can become the soundtrack to people's lives.
How has your relationship as brothers evolved through the highs and lows? And how has your perspective on the importance of family kind of changed?
Well, the good news is that when you go through the Bible, there are incredible amounts of incredibly screwed up families every step of the way. And yet Jesus still chose to use, God still chose to use these people, brothers, a lot of their brothers, some of the 12 of his disciples are these Old Testament just liars, scallywags, scoundrels and they were family and he still chose to use the family unit to bring about his purposes. And so I will say, I'm really proud to still be in it with family. As the documentary showcases, it's not a walk in the park. And if that's what anyone takes away from Unsung Hero, the documentary, then they need to rethink. I think what we hope to propose is that there is a power and a beauty and a trust in fighting for family, and yes, boundaries and all the rest of it, but fighting for family to live in community, to live in love, that I fear sometimes we're losing in 2025 and beyond. We're losing the beauty of the father passing down to the son or the mother passing down to the daughter. And so I feel very privileged to be in this, a meshed codependent mess of what this family is and to keep trying to, bring the colors out of it. And I really feel God's goodness. Like I feel God going, okay, it's not about you're awesome because we're a bunch of Australian ragamuffins. It's about the fact that there's something powerful about choosing family, you know? I'm not talking about bloodlines even per se, but the fact of the matter is I grew up with this dude next to me. And then somewhere along the way, we came back around and we said, you know what? We're going to choose brotherhood now. We're not just brothers anymore. We're actually going to go in and we're going to choose to be brothers. And it's messy and it's hard and it's beautiful. But I feel like we stop short in relationship. We say, it's just too hard. So let's just bow out, and it's been a real gift to collaborate. And I think you have to look at the fruit. And I feel my hope is that the fruit is something that points people heavenward and points people toward each other.
What advice would you have for teens and preteens and young people in general?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, look, I'm not a theologian, nor am I a scholar, nor am I a pastor, but I have a love for Jesus. And so hopefully I can speak to some of these things. I think to the life advice I would say is, you know, there's this idea of like, hey, I'm gonna graduate high school, I'm gonna go to college, and I'm gonna do these things, and there's this kind of and nothing against any of those things, but there's a rhythm to life that like if they tick these boxes, they're doing great. But it's also kind of a system, right? And it's almost like you're pre-programmed to think these things. When I look in the Bible, I see people that were not pre-programmed to do any of these things per se, and there's these crazy moments that happen. I would say to the youth, dream up God-sized dreams. Don't tell yourself all the reasons why you can't do something. Don't tell yourself all the reasons why that doesn't make sense. Dream up big dreams and then go and test these things. I mean, we forget that God says, like, test the spirit.
Mm.
So if you feel like God's telling you that something's going on, go and try it and actually see, is this actually something that is of God? And if through that process that it's identified that it is, well, then you're well on your way to that God-sized dream, because we need people in government to go, I don't know what to do. I'm going to go to the Christians. They're the ones who are the best at problem solving. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to biblical truth, to the youth, always seek wisdom in everything you do. Go by wisdom in all cases, in every scenario. Try and find people that are wiser, smarter, that are living the life you hope to live. Go ask them all the questions that you could ever ask. And then obviously emulate who Jesus is, but then emulate the way that these people that you respect. What are some of the tent poles of why they're interesting to you? The tent poles of why you want to be like them. Go emulate those things. My oldest is 12 years old, and so we're coming into some of those things now. I would say this, dating and uh, trying to find a spouse is complicated, right? It's a little bit messy, but I think what happens is there's this pressure to find these and figure these things out quite young. And at the end of the day is if you're 13, 14 and you already have had like 3 or 4 or 5 girlfriends, there's just so much damage attached to that. There's just so much hurt, there's so much sadness. And what I would say is man, go be friends with these people. Go be in, like, there's nothing wrong with being attracted to the girl that's next to you in the classroom. But should you be going on an exclusive dates at 14, 15? Probably not. But should you go out and befriend that person? 1,000%. And so I think that you can find out a lot more. I would say this to the youth. I would say only date truly when you think there is a great chance that this person I'm spending time with could be my spouse. Get to that point before you say, we're going to be exclusive or whatever. I think that's a must, because otherwise there's just too much hardship and there's just too much hurt.
Would you be involved in one of these alternative Super Bowl shows? Have you been approached about performing?
We have been approached, but that's a tricky one because you get into a lot of politics, you get into a lot of those different things. I think Joel and I probably view our own concerts as their own little mini Super Bowls. So just come to one of those instead.
Over the 20 years you've been a band, what's a moment you can remember distinctly being a God moment?
This might be a bit backwards, and I might get my hand slapped for this one. Luke tearing his ACL in the first game of his junior year of high school. Because dad had, cover this in the documentary, but dad had approached him during that time about being involved. And there was something about him being a younger brother and as well suited as we might have been. And that dad saw the sort of
Was not obvious in the moment.
him being better at sports and him being a better singer, all these things were like, and taller. I was like, I don't like, yeah, ego. I don't see it. But there was there's some real kind of, I mean, if any of you tore your ACL, you know, it's a game changer for about 6 months. At least it was then. And there was just something that really kind of reset the the narrative, and it created actually frankly just a lot of empathy in me. And so we always attribute, I use it as a sad and ironically at Luke's expense example, but we always are so keen to attribute these sort of sparkly magical moments to God. And don't get me wrong, he's there in them. I'm not saying he's not, but he's also with the poor in spirit, and he's
Mhm.
also with those that are struggling and hurting. And I would argue almost more so if the economy of spirituality works like that. And that was just a hard moment that I saw turn for good, and it really set a course for both of our lives. You know, some ligaments in his left knee set a course for our future, which is funny to say, isn't it?
What hope do you see in a Jesus revolution and revival?
Look, when it comes to the movement that is what I think is a budding revival right now, which I think for all of us that are listening to this, we should all be a part of, and we should all figure out how can we be a part of that. But what I would say is this: I think it's because they've tried everything. I think that, when I hear some of the stories that I'm hearing, it's like, dude, they've done all of the stuff and they feel worse. They find themselves more addicted. They find themselves more miserable. And then all of the things that they think are cool, they're like, this doesn't produce anything that I want to live for. And so they're looking for something as crazy as Jesus. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Because if you think
Yeah.
of it, that what they would probably have lived life going, I'm going to do all these things. That guy over there, he's insane. I'm never going to do that. And then they go, well, all the other crazy stuff that I've tried, maybe I need to go crazier. And they're going to try. They try the blood of Jesus, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden, it doesn't mean that it instantly changes their circumstances, but somehow it seems to it instantly changes their joy. It instantly changes their peace. It instantly changes the what's going on in their head. Now, I've got to have accountability. There's a process. There's got to be healing. But what I'm seeing is people that are hopeless leaving certain rooms hope filled. Explain that to me. It's a
Mm.
modern day miracle. It
Absolutely.
doesn't exist. If you start following these people's lives that are turning to Jesus, they have the most upsetting, the most tragic life stories, and yet they come in with the same amount of baggage, and they leave feeling freedom. Explain that to me. It's miraculous. And so to me, that's the hope that obviously that we try to convey in our songs. It's the hope that we can try to convey in our lives. And that's the hope that we look forward to continuing to deliver through the stories that God continues to give us.
What do you see as the value in collaboration, and are there more collaborations coming soon?
I love collaboration. We were late to the game, really discovered it on our third studio album, Burn the Ships. And I I feel like rubbing shoulders who think, act, look, vote different from you is actually the spice of life. I think we're trying to say we should sort of isolate and get into our corners. And I think in the arts we're saying, no, 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 we need to be pulling people in because it's really hard to hate people up close. You know, proximity is a beautiful thing. And so we've been so fortunate to have such, like you said, such an eclectic group of people could have raised their hand and say, let's partner on that song or that film. Um, and be able to perform on the CMAs with Dolly and so on. And so we're incredibly proud. This era for us is a different one because we're looking at, stepping into film a bit more. We've got a new project that we're just actually going to go back in the studio and keep finishing up for you. and asking a load of new questions, one of which is, how can we show up in places that you wouldn't expect, with people that you wouldn't expect? So, without sort of blowing our cover too much, I'll tell you that I think you'll find that when we do show up somewhere in a collaboration or, with an actor on a film, I think you'll be like, "Huh, that's fun and funny and strange. I didn't see that one coming." So, it's the spice of life, and it's been beautiful in our career. Some of the highest compliments, and we hope to continue it. Simply said.
Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Go check out No Turning Back now on the Wonder Project subscription on Amazon Prime. And happy Thanksgiving.